I have the bookcase quilt all pinned up and ready to quilt this weekend. I want to talk about fabric selection. The first piece you're going to need is the dark brown fabric that represents the interior of the bookcase. It has a medium brown around the outside edges that's supposed to look like a wood bookcase, so the interior needs to be a very dark brown. I picked up some brown fabrics. This lightest one is the one I used to represent a wood frame. This one turned out to be a little lighter than I liked because it didn't contrast with this one quite as strongly. This is a very nice, simple, dark solid. This one I'm looking forward to using because it has a textured print. An advantage of using a textured print is that the texture of the fabric, the print of the fabric, helps to conceal seams. In a solid fabric, those seams are more apparent. The quilting will disguise some of those seams, so it won't be that significant. But I like to use prints whenever I can. After you've chosen that interior fabric and also your wood frame, you need to think about what fabrics you want your books to be made out of. They have to be bright enough or light enough that they show up strongly against the interior also. I preferred a fairly medium contrast for my books. Some of them are quite light, like this, and some of them are a little darker, like this one or this one. But overall, they're a nice medium blend of fabrics. It is important that you keep what I call textured solids, like this or that brown I showed you, or prints that are not a real high contrast. If it is a small enough print, you can use that, but you can't use a very large scale print like you see here on this vase, because by the time you cut it into a strip to represent a book spine, you won't see that print anymore. I don't use many fabrics that are true solids. Most of them have some texture or pattern to them. Some of the books have little inset spaces here, like you might see on regular books. Some of them I got real fancy and used stripes. And a lot of them I just kept solid. I mean straight spines with no little inset pieces in order to avoid making them cluttered. I wanted a nice combination where they blended together and yet stood out individually. I had hoped to put names and titles on the book spines, but as I worked on it, I decided that would make it too cluttered, and I couldn't find a way to do it so it looked very professional. If I'd had an embroidery machine, that might have worked nicely, but I didn't want to try to write on them or spend a lot of time printing on a transfer fabric. These are some of the fabrics that I ended up selecting for my books. Obviously, I didn't use them all. These are some that I ended up not using because they were a little brighter than I had in mind. I wanted more of a blend, and I didn't want any one to stand out individually. These fabrics wouldn't work real well for books. This one is quite multicolored. This one has those large motifs, and it also has writing on it that would not look like a book spine. And this strongly striped and colored one, I couldn't think of a way to use that as a single spine.